Supreme Archon Kelvanis sat on his crystal throne, watching the holographic display with barely hidden contempt. The three-dimensional map showed the territory of the Valorian hegemony, stretching across 47 star systems. It was beautiful. It was powerful. And now a tiny red dot blinked at the edge of their space, representing the newest problem: humans. They are building stations in the Corvesh sector, Intelligence Officer Saren said, her voice steady despite the Archon's dark mood. 3 mining outposts and 1 research facility. Our patrol discovered them 2 cycles ago. Kelvanis waved his hand dismissively. And what makes these creatures different from the last 14 civilizations we encountered? Did we not crush the Netheri? Did the Boscan Confederacy not beg for mercy before we absorbed their worlds? Saren hesitated. She had studied the reports carefully, more carefully than anyone else in the military command. Something about the humans worried her. Their technology seemed inconsistent, almost primitive in some areas, yet strangely advanced in others. But she knew better than to push the Archon when he was in this mood. They are still a young species, Supreme Archon. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. By galactic standards, they are children. Then they should learn to respect their elders, Kelvanis said, standing from his throne. He was tall, even for a Valorian, his scaled skin shimmering with the purple hue of nobility. Send the 7th Patrol Fleet. Remove their outposts. If they complain, remind them that the Corvesh sector belongs to the hegemony. Admiral Thrace, commander of the 7th Fleet, shifted uncomfortably. Supreme Archon, perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact first. The humans have not shown hostility. They may simply be unaware of our territorial claims. Kelvanis turned his cold eyes toward the Admiral. Are you questioning my judgment, Thrace? No, Supreme Archon. I will carry out your orders immediately. The patrol fleet arrived at the human mining station 3 days later. 15 Valorian warships surrounded the small orbital facility. The humans working there never had a chance to evacuate. The Valorian plasma lances tore through the station's thin hull in seconds. Atmosphere vented into space. 3,000 human colonists died in less than 5 minutes. Admiral Thrace watched from his flagship's bridge, feeling a strange emptiness in his chest. It had been too easy. The humans had barely attempted to defend themselves. Their station had almost no weapons, just basic mining lasers meant for cutting asteroids. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld, his communications officer reported. They are demanding an explanation for our attack. Thrace straightened his uniform. Put them through. A human face appeared on the screen. She was female, with dark hair pulled back tightly and eyes that seemed far too calm for someone whose people had just been slaughtered. She wore a military uniform, simple and functional, with captain's insignia on her collar. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Confederation Space Command, she said, her voice clear and steady. You have just murdered 3,000 unarmed civilians. We demand an immediate explanation and reparations for this act of war. Admiral Thrace felt a flicker of respect for this human's composure. I am Admiral Thrace of the Valorian hegemony. Your people were mining in our territory without permission. This was a legal enforcement action. Captain Chen's expression did not change. You did not attempt communication. You did not issue warnings. You simply opened fire on unarmed civilians. By any definition, Admiral, that is a war crime. War crime? Thrace repeated the unfamiliar phrase. Your species is new to this sector. Perhaps you do not understand how things work here. The Valorian hegemony has existed for 3,000 of your years. We have conquered 14 civilizations. When we claim territory, it becomes ours. When others trespass, we remove them. I see, Chen said quietly. Then let me be clear, Admiral. The Terran Confederation does not recognize your territorial claim. The Corvesh sector was unclaimed space, open to all species for peaceful development. You have committed an unprovoked act of aggression against humanity. Thrace felt his scales ripple with amusement. And what does your Confederation intend to do about it? We are sending a response, Chen said simply. 1 warship. The TCS Retribution. It will arrive at your position in 72 hours. I suggest you prepare to surrender yourselves for trial. The transmission ended. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then laughter erupted from the crew. 1 warship? A single vessel against the 15 ships of the patrol fleet? But Admiral Thrace did not laugh. Something in Captain Chen's eyes had disturbed him. She had not shown fear or even anger. She had shown the calm certainty of someone who held all the cards in a game. When news of the exchange reached the Valorian homeworld, Supreme Archon Kelvanus was furious. Not at the human response, but at what he perceived as their disrespect. One ship? He roared at his assembled military council. They dare send one ship as their answer? This is an insult beyond measure. Saren stepped forward cautiously. Supreme Archon, I have been reviewing the intelligence we have on human vessels. There are inconsistencies. Their ships use technology we do not fully understand. Perhaps we should— Enough. Kelvanus slammed his fist on the council table. I will not hear cowardice in this chamber. Thrace, return to the Corvesh sector. Take the entire 7th Fleet, all 200 vessels. When this human warship arrives, destroy it utterly. I want nothing left but atoms. Let the humans learn what happens when they challenge the hegemony. Yes. Supreme Archon, Thrace replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. As the council dispersed, Saren remained behind, staring at the intelligence reports on her datapad. She had spent the last 3 days gathering every piece of information available about humanity. What she found terrified her. Humans had not discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago, as most species did shortly after achieving spaceflight. They had spent nearly 400 years confined to their own solar system first, 400 years building, testing, and perfecting their technology in the harsh environment of space before they ever left their home star. That was not normal. Most species reached the stars and immediately began expanding, learning as they went. But humans had practiced first. They had made their mistakes in their own backyard, where failure would not doom their species. More disturbing were the historical records. Humans had a concept called world wars, that they had fought multiple times on their home planet. Conflicts that involved their entire species using weapons of mass destruction. They had nearly destroyed themselves several times before, finally achieving peace and reaching for the stars. They were a species that had perfected warfare before they perfected spaceflight. Saren tried one last time to warn the Supreme Archon, but he dismissed her concerns. The 7th Fleet departed for the Corvesh sector, 200 of the hegemony's finest warships, with Admiral Thrace commanding from the flagship Dominator. They arrived at the nebula and took up defensive positions, sensors scanning for the approaching human vessel. Thrace stood on his bridge, watching the displays, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in his stomach. Sir, contact, the sensor officer called out. One vessel emerging from FTL at the edge of the system. Put it on screen, Thrace ordered. The human warship appeared. It was smaller than expected, perhaps 3/4 the size of a Valorian heavy cruiser. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with no decorative elements or impressive designs. It looked functional, purposeful, like a tool designed for a specific job. The designation painted on its hull read, TCS Retribution. Open a channel, Thrace commanded. Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen once more. Admiral Thrace, I see you brought friends. Captain Chen, Thrace replied, trying to sound confident. You are outnumbered 200 to 1. I will give you one opportunity to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Chen smiled slightly, and it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, I am required by Terran law to offer you the same choice. You have committed war crimes against the Terran Confederation. Surrender now, and you will be given fair trials. Refuse, and we will use all necessary force to bring you to justice. Thrace's scales flushed with anger. You think one ship can defeat my fleet? No, Admiral, Chen said quietly. I don't think it, I know it. You have 30 seconds to decide. The transmission ended. Thrace stared at the screen, his heart's pounding. Then he turned to his weapons officer. All ships, open fire. Destroy that vessel. 200 Valorian warships unleashed hell itself upon the TCS Retribution. The space around the TCS Retribution turned into a storm of light and energy. Plasma lances, superheated to millions of degrees, lashed out from the Valorian fleet. Fusion missiles streaked through the void, their warheads carrying enough power to vaporize asteroids. Graviton beams, weapons that could tear apart molecular bonds, focused on the single human vessel. On the bridge of the Dominator, Admiral Thrace watched his tactical display with satisfaction. No ship could survive such concentrated firepower. Nothing in the galaxy could withstand the combined might of 200 warships firing simultaneously. The weapons struck the Retribution's shields in a brilliant explosion of energy. The light was so intense that the view screens automatically dimmed to protect the crew's eyes. For 3 full seconds, the human ship was completely hidden behind a sphere of destructive force. Then the light faded. The Retribution hung in space, completely undamaged. Its shields had not flickered. They had not dimmed. The energy readings showed they were still at full strength, as if the massive attack had been nothing more than a light breeze. Impossible, Thrace whispered, staring at his instruments. Sensors, recheck those readings. There must be an error. No error, Admiral, the sensor officer replied, his voice shaking. Their shields absorbed the entire barrage. No damage detected. On the human ship's bridge, Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, watching her own displays with cold efficiency. Around her, the crew worked at their stations with practiced calm. They had trained for this moment. Shield strength at 98%, the defensive systems officer reported. Capacitors recharging. No hull damage. Target analysis complete, the weapons officer added. We have firing solutions on all 200 enemy vessels. Chen nodded slowly. Open a channel. Let them see what they are facing. Her face appeared on every Valorian ship's communication screen. Admiral Thrace, I gave you a chance to surrender. You chose violence, so be it. By the authority vested in me by the Terran Confederation, I'm authorized to use all necessary force. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your souls, because I will not. She closed the channel and turned to her weapons officer. Fire at will. Target their engines first. I want survivors who can tell others what happened here. Aye, Captain. The Retribution began to fire. What emerged from the human warship was unlike anything the Valorians had ever encountered. Kinetic projectiles, solid slugs of depleted uranium and tungsten, accelerated to 95% of light speed by magnetic rails. At such velocities, mass became a weapon more terrible than any energy beam. When they struck Valorian shields, they did not dissipate or scatter. They punched through like bullets through paper. Antimatter warheads followed, each containing just enough exotic matter to create devastating explosions. The Valorians knew of antimatter, but they considered it too dangerous and unstable to weaponize. The humans had not only weaponized it, but had made it reliable enough to use in combat. Then came weapons the Valorians had no names for, quantum entanglement disruptors that caused enemy shields to collapse by disrupting the very particles they were made from, focused gravity wells that crushed ships like a giant's fist, particle beams that ignored conventional defenses entirely, passing through shields to cook the crew inside their own vessels. The first Valorian ship, a heavy destroyer, lost its engines in the opening salvo. The second lost its weapons. The third simply exploded when an antimatter warhead breached its reactor core. Admiral Thrace watched in horror as his fleet began to die. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Concentrate fire on that vessel's engines. But the Retribution moved like nothing they had ever seen. It dodged and weaved through their return fire with impossible precision. Every shot the Valorians fired missed by meters or struck shields that seemed designed specifically to counter their weapons. How is it doing this? Thrace demanded. How can one ship move so fast, fire so accurately, and defend against everything we have? His tactical officer had been analyzing the human ship's movements. Sir, I believe their computer systems are far more advanced than ours. Their reaction time is nearly instantaneous. And their weapons. They are using targeting systems that predict our movements before we make them. 5 minutes into the battle, 20 Valorian ships were disabled or destroyed. 10 minutes and that number had doubled. The human vessel had not taken a single point of damage beyond the initial barrage. Saren's warnings echoed in Thrace's mind. The humans had spent 400 years in their own solar system, perfecting their technology. While other species rushed to the stars and stopped innovating, humans had continued to improve, to test, to advance. This ship was not just 200 years more advanced than it should be. It was 400 years ahead of where the Valorians expected any new species to be. Fall back, Thrace ordered. All ships retreat to... An explosion cut him off. 3 ships in the vanguard simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that seemed to bend space itself. On the Retribution, Chen watched the tactical display with no satisfaction, only grim determination. She took no pleasure in this slaughter, but it was necessary. The Valorians needed to learn that humanity would not be pushed around, that the death of 3,000 civilians had consequences. Captain, multiple enemy vessels attempting to flee, her tactical officer reported. Let them go, Chen ordered. Target the command ship's engine specifically. Disable it but do not destroy it. I want Admiral Thrace alive. The Retribution's weapons shifted focus. A precisely aimed kinetic round struck the Dominator's engine section, tearing through armor and destroying the faster-than-light drive. The flagship was left drifting, powerless but intact. The remaining Valorian ships that could still move began to flee in all directions. Some activated their FTL drives and vanished into the safety of hyperspace. Others, too damaged to jump, tried to hide in the nebula's dense gas clouds. Chen did not pursue them. She had made her point. The battle had lasted 47 minutes. Of the 200 Valorian warships that had attacked, 37 were completely destroyed. 119 were disabled, drifting in space with dead engines and shattered weapons. 44 had managed to escape. The TCS Retribution had not suffered a single casualty. Chen stood from her command chair and straightened her uniform. Helm, bring us alongside the Valorian flagship. Communications, hail them. Admiral Thrace appeared on her screen. His scales had turned a pale gray, the color of shock and fear. Behind him, his bridge was in chaos, with sparking consoles and injured crew members being treated by medics. Admiral, Chen said quietly, you attacked unarmed civilians. You refused to surrender. You chose this outcome. Do you understand now why we sent one ship? Thrace could not speak. He simply stared at her, his entire worldview shattered. The Valorian hegemony had conquered 14 civilizations. They were the most powerful military force in this sector of space, and they had been crushed by a single human warship in less than an hour. You will remain here, Chen continued. We are dispatching recovery vessels to take your surviving crew into custody. You will all stand trial for war crimes. Your fleet will be studied, then recycled, and one of your ships, the least damaged one, will be released to return to your homeworld. Why? Thrace finally managed to ask. Why let any of us go? Chen's expression hardened. Because your leaders need to see what happened here. They need to understand what will happen if they attack humanity again. We did not want this war, Admiral. We never wanted it. But you started it and we will finish it. She gestured to someone off-screen. And the transmission ended. Admiral Thrace sat in his damaged command chair, surrounded by the ruins of his fleet, and understood that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Valorian hegemony had built their power on the assumption that they were the apex predators of space. That assumption was now revealed to be catastrophically wrong. The humans were not prey. They were not even competitors. They were something far more dangerous. 3 days later, the least damaged Valorian cruiser limped back to the hegemony homeworld. Its captain carried complete tactical recordings of the battle, detailed sensor logs, and a simple message from Captain Chen to Supreme Archon Kelvanis. The message contained only 5 words. This was your only warning. When the recordings were played before the military council, several officers fainted. Others demanded the footage be checked for manipulation or forgery. It was impossible, they insisted. No species could build such a vessel. No single ship could defeat an entire fleet. But Supreme Archon Kelvanis sat in silence, watching the recordings over and over. He saw his finest fleet torn apart like paper. He saw weapons that should not exist. He saw shields that laughed at the hegemony's most powerful attacks. And for the first time in his long life, Kelvanis felt the cold touch of fear. Mobilize the entire military, he said quietly. Contact the Zelthari Concordat, the Hive Collective, the Merchant Princes of Andraxis. Tell them we face a threat unlike any we have encountered. Tell them we must unite or we will all fall. Saren, standing at the back of the chamber, closed her eyes. She had tried to warn them. Now it was too late. The hegemony had kicked a sleeping giant, and that giant was now very much awake. The war had only just begun. The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with access to interstellar communications saw the recordings of the Battle of Corvish Nebula. The images were stark and undeniable. 200 Valorian warships reduced to scrap metal by a single human vessel in less than an hour. In the crystalline spires of the Zelthari Concordat, the Council of Minds gathered to discuss this new development. The Zelthari were an ancient race, their civilization older than most stars in the region. They prided themselves on their wisdom and their long view of galactic affairs. This changes the balance of power, High Mind Varshek observed, his crystalline body flickering with concerned colors. If the humans possess such technology, they could threaten any of us. Or defend us, another council member suggested. Perhaps we should seek alliance rather than confrontation. But Varshek was already receiving urgent communications from Supreme Archon Kelvanus. The Valorian leader was calling for a grand coalition, a united front against the human threat. The message was clear: band together now or face the humans alone later. In the hive cities of the collective, a different conversation was taking place. The hive operated through shared consciousness, millions of individuals thinking as one. They had no concept of individual ships or captains. Their fleets moved as living organisms coordinated perfectly through psionic links. The Hive Queen processed the battle data with interest. The humans fought as individuals, yet their coordination was nearly perfect. How did they achieve such unity without shared consciousness? The question fascinated and disturbed her in equal measure. Meanwhile, the merchant princes of Andraxis saw opportunity rather than threat. They were traders and business people first, warriors only when necessary. If human technology was so advanced, perhaps there were profits to be made in understanding it, copying it, or simply trading with those who possessed it. But across all these civilizations, one question dominated every conversation. How had humanity become so powerful? Saren had been asking herself the same question. As intelligence officer of the Valorian military, it was her job to find answers. She had spent the week since the battle, gathering every scrap of information about human history and development. What she discovered should have been impossible. She presented her findings to a small group of military analysts, away from the Supreme Archon's grandstanding and demands for immediate retaliation. Most species follow a similar path, Saren explained, displaying a holographic timeline. They develop on their homeworld, achieve spaceflight, discover faster-than-light travel, and begin colonizing other systems. The average time from first spaceflight to first interstellar colony is 73 years. She changed the display to show humanity's timeline. Humans are different. They achieved spaceflight nearly 600 years ago, but they did not discover FTL until 400 years later. For 4 centuries, they were trapped in their own solar system. One of the analysts interrupted. That makes no sense. FTL is not that difficult to discover. Most species stumble upon the basic principles within a generation of leaving their atmosphere. Exactly, Saren said, which suggests humans are either remarkably stupid or remarkably unlucky. But their technology proves they are neither. So I asked myself, what were they doing for 400 years? She pulled up records of human solar system development. The images showed massive orbital stations, asteroid mining operations, planetary colonies, and generation ships designed to travel between stars at slower than light speeds. They were practicing, Saren said softly. They were learning how to survive in space, how to build in zero gravity, how to extract resources from lifeless rocks. They were testing every possible technology in the safety of their own solar system. When they finally discovered FTL, they did not rush out unprepared like most species. They came out already knowing how to thrive in space. Another display appeared showing human historical records. But there is more. Before they reached space at all, humans spent 10,000 years at war with themselves. They have records of conflicts dating back to their earliest civilizations. They perfected warfare long before they perfected spaceflight. The analysts stared at the data in growing horror. They saw records of ancient human conflicts, swords and spears giving way to gunpowder, then to automatic weapons, then to missiles and aircraft. They saw the development of nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. They saw planetary wars that killed millions, conflicts that nearly destroyed human civilization multiple times. They almost destroyed themselves, one analyst whispered. Multiple times. Yes, Saren confirmed. And each time they learned. They studied war like we study art or philosophy. They wrote books about strategy, tactics, and logistics. They built entire schools dedicated to teaching warfare. And then finally they achieved global peace. But they never forgot the lessons they learned. She displayed the schematics of the TCS Retribution, captured by their sensors during the brief battle. This ship is not just advanced technology. It is 10,000 years of warfare condensed into steel and energy. Every system, every weapon, every defense was designed by a species that has been fighting since before they had written language. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Every other species in the galaxy had achieved peace before reaching the stars. They developed weapons only as needed, usually copying designs from species they encountered. Military innovation was slow, incremental, often neglected in favor of more peaceful pursuits. But humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing before they ever left their homeworld. They had then spent centuries more adapting those lessons to space warfare. By the time they made contact with other species, they were not newcomers to war. They were its oldest students. "There is one more thing," Saren said, her voice grave. She displayed a document that had taken her days to translate properly. Humans have something they call laws of war, rules that govern how they fight, what weapons they can use, how they treat prisoners and civilians. "That seems civilized," one analyst ventured. "It is," Saren agreed. "Humans created these laws to limit the brutality of their own conflicts. They try very hard to be peaceful. They prefer negotiation to violence, but—" She paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. "When their laws of war are broken by enemies, when civilians are deliberately targeted, when war crimes are committed against them, they set those laws aside. And they do not hold back." The analysts looked at each other with growing dread. The Supreme Archon had ordered the destruction of an unarmed civilian mining station. 3,000 deaths. By human standards, that was not just an act of war, it was a war crime of the highest order. "We did not just attack them," one analyst said slowly. "We gave them legal and moral justification to destroy us completely." "Yes," Saren said simply. Across the galaxy, similar realizations were occurring. The more advanced species began serious investigations into human capabilities. What they found was terrifying. Humans had 47 warships of similar capability to the Retribution, one for each Valorian star system. They had shipyards capable of producing more. Their economy was based on a model of constant innovation and improvement, pushing technology forward even in peacetime. They had military academies that had been teaching warfare for centuries. They had veterans who had fought in border skirmishes and training exercises that simulated every possible combat scenario. And perhaps most disturbing, they had only deployed one ship in response to the initial attack. They were holding back, testing Valorian capabilities before committing their full force. The message was clear. This was not even their full strength. Supreme Archon Kelvanus refused to accept any of it. When Saren presented her findings to him, he threw the datapad across the room. "Lies and fear-mongering," he shouted. "You would have me believe that these creatures who only reached the stars 200 years ago are more powerful than the hegemony? Than all the civilizations of this sector combined? I would have you believe the evidence, Supreme Archon," Saren replied calmly, though her hearts were racing. "The humans are not like other species we have encountered. They are different in fundamental ways. Different how? They bleed, do they not? Their ships can be destroyed. They are not gods." "No," Saren agreed. "They are not gods. But they are the only species in this galaxy that learn to kill before they learn to dream of stars. And they are very, very good at it." Kelvanus turned away from her, looking out at the capital city sprawling below his palace. The hegemony had stood for 3,000 years. They had crushed all opposition, and he would not let his legacy be defined by cowering before these upstart humans. "Send messages to all our allies," he commanded. "Tell them the Valorian hegemony calls for a grand coalition. The humans have shown themselves to be a threat to galactic order. They must be eliminated before they grow even stronger. 5 empires united against one young species. How can we fail?" Saren said nothing. She simply bowed and left to carry out his orders, knowing that she was witnessing the beginning of the end. The Supreme Archon's pride would not let him see the truth. He had decided that humans were just another species to be conquered, another entry in the hegemony's long list of victories. He was wrong. Catastrophically, tragically wrong. The war began at dawn on 5 fronts simultaneously. 3,000 warships from 5 different empires emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edges of human-controlled systems. The Valorian hegemony committed 800 vessels. The Zelthari Concordat brought 600. The Hive Collective deployed 1,000 ships, each controlled by a single shared consciousness. The Merchant Princes sent 400, and various smaller allies contributed the rest. It was the largest combined military force assembled in galactic history. Supreme Archon Kelvanus commanded from his personal flagship, the Eternal Glory, a massive dreadnought 3 times the size of the vessel that had faced the Retribution. "Today, we write history," Kelvanus announced to his allies over the command channel. Today, we show the humans that the established powers of this galaxy will not tolerate their aggression. Today, we end their threat forever. The response from the human colonies was immediate, but not what the coalition expected. Instead of the desperate defense they anticipated, instead of the overwhelming fear of facing impossible odds, the humans simply deployed their actual fleet. The TCS Retribution had been a patrol frigate. The ships that met the coalition were purpose-built weapons of war. 12 dreadnoughts led the human formation. Each was twice the size of the Retribution, bristling with weapons that made the frigate's armament look like training equipment. Their names spoke of human history and values: justice, vengeance, liberty, resolution, indomitable, defiance, perseverance, vigilance, resilience, determination, reckoning, and at the center, commanding the entire fleet, the TCS Unconquerable. Behind the dreadnoughts came 35 carrier vessels, each housing hundreds of fighter craft, piloted by humans who had trained their entire lives for combat. The fighters were small, fast, and deadly, capable of darting between larger ships to strike at weak points, and surrounding this core were 200 cruisers, each equivalent in power to the Retribution. They moved in perfect formation, their shields overlapping to create defensive networks that could withstand concentrated fire. Admiral Marcus Stone commanded the Unconquerable. He was older than Captain Chen, a veteran of the border wars where humanity had fought off pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. His face, weathered and scarred, appeared on every coalition command screen. "This is Admiral Stone of the Terran Confederation. You have invaded sovereign human territory. You have declared war on our people. I am authorized to offer you one chance to withdraw. Leave now and we will allow you to retreat with your lives. Stay, and you will learn why humanity has survived 10,000 years of warfare." Supreme Archon Kelvanus laughed. "You are outnumbered 10-1, Admiral. Your bravado means nothing. All ships advance! Show them the might of the coalition." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations, though not for the reasons Kelvanus expected. The coalition fleet advanced in a massive wall formation, overlapping fields of fire designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume. It was a proven tactic, one that had worked against every enemy they had ever faced. The humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, the fleet split into 4 smaller groups, each led by 3 dreadnoughts. They moved not as a solid block but as fluid formations, darting in and out of the coalition lines like sharks attacking a school of fish. "What are they doing?" demanded High Mind Varshek of the Zilthari. "This makes no tactical sense. They are breaking their defensive cohesion." But Admiral Stone knew exactly what he was doing. The humans were not fighting a defensive battle. They were fighting an aggressive one, using tactics developed over millennia of warfare. Hit and run. Divide and conquer. Attack the flanks and create chaos in the enemy ranks. The coalition learned their first painful lesson. Individual ships meant nothing if they could not coordinate effectively. The 5 empires had different communication systems, different tactical doctrines, different response times. Trying to coordinate 3,000 ships from multiple species was like trying to conduct an orchestra, where each musician read a different language. The humans had no such problems. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon system was linked through quantum communication networks that operated in real time. Orders from Admiral Stone reached every vessel simultaneously. Tactical data flowed seamlessly between ships. They fought not as individual vessels, but as a single, unified force. The first coalition ships began to fall within minutes. Human fighters swarmed around Valorian cruisers, their small size making them nearly impossible to target effectively. They unleashed missiles at point-blank range, targeting engine sections and weapon systems. Behind them, the cruisers finished off disabled vessels with precise fire. The dreadnoughts were even more terrifying. Their main weapons were magnetic accelerator cannons that fired projectiles at 98% of light speed. At such velocities, the projectiles had more energy than some star systems generated in a year. When they struck coalition shields, they did not simply penetrate. They shattered them completely, often destroying multiple ships in a single shot, as the projectile continued through its target and into whatever was behind it. The Hive Collective tried to use their psionic coordination to counter human tactics. 1,000 ships moved as one organism, attempting to surround and crush a human battle group. But the humans had studied the Hive's tactics, captured from previous conflicts with other species. They knew the weakness: kill the command nodes. And the swarm lost coordination. Human fighters equipped with special warheads targeted the Hive's coordinator ships, vessels that served as relay points for the psionic network. When these ships died, entire sections of the Hive fleet went dark, ships drifting aimlessly as they lost their connection to the collective consciousness. Impossible, the Hive Queen shrieked from her distant throne world. How do they know our network structure? How do they identify our command nodes? The answer was simple but terrifying. Humans had fought enemies like the Hive before. Not in space, but on their own world. Insect swarms, pack hunters, any enemy that fought with collective coordination. They had studied these behaviors for thousands of years. The Hive was not a new challenge. They were an old enemy with new technology. Supreme Archon Kelvanus watched his tactical display with growing horror as the Coalition fleet began to disintegrate. 3,000 ships against 250. And somehow the Coalition was losing. All Valorian vessels concentrate fire on the human flagship, he commanded. If we kill their admiral, they will lose coordination just like the Hive. 800 Valorian ships turned their weapons on the Unconquerable. The massive dreadnought was struck by enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Its shields flared brilliant white, absorbing energy that could have evaporated oceans. And then the shields failed. For one brief moment, Kelvanus felt triumph. The human flagship was exposed, vulnerable. Weapons continued to pour fire into the vessel's hull, but the Unconquerable did not die. The ship's armor was layered composite materials, designed to absorb and disperse energy. Plasma that should have melted through the hull was dispersed across self-repairing plates. Kinetic rounds that should have penetrated deep into the ship were stopped by reactive armor that exploded outward to counter the incoming force, and while the Valorians focused all their attention on killing the flagship, the rest of the human fleet struck at them from the sides and rear. Admiral Stone's voice came over the communication channel, calm despite his ship being under concentrated fire.
Captain Chen, you have tactical command.
I will be occupied for the next few minutes. Understood, Admiral, Chen replied from the Retribution, which had joined the battle as part of the cruiser screen. All ships pattern Delta 7. Protect the Unconquerable and make them regret that decision. The human fleet moved with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Carriers launched their full complement of fighters, thousands of small craft that swarmed the Valorian formation. Cruisers formed a protective barrier around the damaged flagship, their shields overlapping to create a nearly impenetrable wall. And the other 11 dreadnoughts, freed from any need to hold back, unleashed their full arsenals. The Coalition broke. It was not a retreat or a tactical withdrawal. It was a rout. Ships fled in all directions. Some so panicked they jumped to FTL without calculating safe vectors and were lost forever in the space between dimensions. Others tried to surrender but were caught in the crossfire as allies continued fighting around them. The merchant princes were the first to officially request ceasefire. Their spokesperson appeared on all channels, broadcasting surrender and begging for mercy. The humans accepted immediately, directing merchant vessels to a safe zone away from the fighting. The Zelthari Concordat held out longer, their pride preventing immediate surrender. But when 3 of their flagships were destroyed in rapid succession, High Mind Varshek gave the order to withdraw. The Zelthari fleet jumped away, leaving the battle. The Hive Collective simply went quiet. With their command structure shattered, the remaining ships drifted, their crews disconnected from the collective consciousness and unsure what to do. Human boarding parties secured them one by one, treating the confused Hive drones with surprising gentleness. Only the Valorian hegemony continued to fight. 6 months after the war ended, Supreme Archon Kelvanus stood in a courtroom on Earth. It was not what he expected. The building was simple, almost plain compared to the grand palaces and temples of the Valorian hegemony. The courtroom itself was designed for function rather than intimidation. Judges sat behind a raised bench, neutral and professional. Prosecutors presented evidence calmly and methodically, and most surprising of all, Kelvanus had been provided with defense attorneys, humans who argued on his behalf despite the crimes he had committed. "This is a mockery," Kelvanus had said when they first explained the process to him. "You defeated me. You have the right to execute me. Why do you pretend to care about justice?" His lead defense attorney, an older woman named Sarah Okonkwo, had looked at him with patient eyes. Because this is how civilized beings conduct themselves, Archon. We do not simply execute our enemies. We prove their crimes, we allow them to defend themselves, and we let the evidence speak. You are weak, Kelvanis spat. No, Okonkwo replied. We are strong enough to follow our principles even when facing our enemies. That is a strength your empire never understood. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Evidence was presented in excruciating detail. Recordings of the attack on the mining station. Testimonies from survivors of the Coalition fleet. Expert witnesses explaining the laws of war and why Kelvanis's actions violated them. Throughout it all, Kelvanis remained defiant. He argued that he was simply defending Valorian territory, that the humans were invaders, that he had done nothing wrong by the standards of his own civilization. On the final day, before the judges delivered their verdict, Captain Sarah Chen took the stand, not as a prosecutor but as a witness to provide context. Captain Chen, the lead judge asked, "You were the first human to engage with the Valorian military. Can you explain to this court why humanity responded so forcefully to the initial attack?" Chen spoke clearly and calmly. The Valorian fleet destroyed an unarmed civilian station without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. 3,000 people died, including families, children, researchers whose only crime was mining asteroids in what we believed was unclaimed space. By our laws, by the principles we have developed over thousands of years of warfare, this was not just an act of war, it was a war crime of the highest order. And yet, the judge continued, humanity could have responded with diplomacy. You could have lodged formal complaints, sought mediation, or simply avoided the sector entirely. Why did you instead send a warship? Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because we have learned, through painful experience, that aggressors do not respect weakness. The Valorian hegemony had conquered 14 civilizations. If we had shown weakness, they would have attacked again. We needed to make it clear that humanity would defend itself and that there would be consequences for attacking civilians. Kelvanis could not help himself. He stood from his seat, scales flushing with anger. You speak of defense, yet you destroyed my fleet. You killed thousands of my people. The judges called for order, but Chen looked directly at Kelvanis and spoke. We gave you a chance to surrender. Before the battle at Corvesh Nebula, I offered you the opportunity to stand down. You refused. During the final battle, my admiral gave the entire coalition a chance to withdraw. You refused. Even then, we targeted engines and weapons, trying to disable rather than destroy. We took thousands of prisoners and treated them well. We did everything we could to minimize loss of life while still defending ourselves. You could have done nothing, Kelvanis shouted. You could have let us have that sector. Chen's expression hardened. You killed 3,000 unarmed civilians. Did you expect us to do nothing? Did you think we would simply accept the slaughter of our people? The courtroom fell silent. Kelvanis stood there, breathing heavily, and for the first time he saw the truth in Chen's eyes. Not hatred, not triumph, but something he had never expected to see. Disappointment. You could have been neighbors, Chen said quietly. You could have traded with us, learned from us, shared the stars with us. Instead, you chose violence, and you forced us to respond in kind. We did not want this war, Archon, but you gave us no choice. Kelvanis sat down slowly, something breaking inside him. For 3,000 years, the Valorian hegemony had taken what they wanted by force. It was how the galaxy worked. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order. But the humans had shown him that there was another way. They were strong enough to destroy the hegemony completely, yet they held trials. They took prisoners. They followed laws even in war. They were warriors who chose to be more than their capacity for violence. The judges delivered their verdict the next day. Kelvanis was found guilty of war crimes, crimes against sentient beings, and unlawful military aggression. His sentence, life imprisonment to be served under house arrest on a human colony world, where he would spend the rest of his days studying human history and philosophy. We do not execute prisoners, the lead judge explained, even ones who have caused such harm. We believe that every being has the capacity to learn and change. Whether you choose to do so is up to you. Kelvanis was taken to a colony world called New Hope. It was a peaceful place with rolling hills and vast oceans. His prison was a comfortable house overlooking a valley where human colonists grew crops and raised families. He had access to a library filled with human history, philosophy, and literature. At first, he refused to read any of it. But as the months passed and loneliness set in, Curiosity eventually won out. He started with human military history. He wanted to understand how they had defeated him so completely. What he found shocked him to his core. The humans had fought wars that made the coalition battle look like a minor skirmish. The two world wars, conflicts that killed hundreds of millions, the nuclear standoff where two human nations had enough weapons to destroy their entire planet, and came within moments of doing so. Countless smaller conflicts, rebellions, and civil wars that had scarred their history. But interspersed with these horrors were stories of humans reaching across divides, former enemies becoming allies, weapons being turned into peaceful tools. The same species that had created fusion bombs had used fusion to power cities. The same minds that designed fighter jets had built spacecraft to explore the cosmos. Humans had not conquered their violent nature. They had learned to channel it, to control it, to use it only when necessary. And they had built laws, international agreements, and moral frameworks to try to prevent future wars even as they prepared for them. One particular document caught Kelvanis's attention. It was called the Geneva Conventions, a set of rules governing warfare that humans had created centuries ago. He read through the provisions with growing amazement. Wounded soldiers must be treated humanely. Prisoners of war must not be tortured. Civilians must never be deliberately targeted. Medical personnel must be protected. These were not suggestions or ideals. They were laws that human militaries followed even in the heat of battle, even when facing enemies who did not reciprocate. Kelvanis thought back to his order to destroy the mining station. To him, it had been a simple matter of clearing trespassers from Valorian space. He had not considered the workers there as people, just obstacles to be removed. The humans saw it differently. Every life had value. Every death required justification. And the deliberate killing of civilians was the gravest crime imaginable. He began reading human philosophy next. Works by people named Kant, King, Gandhi, Mandela. Humans who had advocated for peace, for justice, for treating all beings with dignity. And he learned something that shook him deeply. The humans were not naturally peaceful. They were naturally violent, competitive, and aggressive, just like the Valorians. But they had chosen, consciously and deliberately, to build a civilization that constrained those impulses. They had decided that being strong meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. One evening, Captain Chen visited him. She came alone, without guards, and sat across from him on his porch as the sun set over the valley. "Why are you here?" Kelvanis asked. "I wanted to see how you were adjusting," Chen replied, "and to answer a question you asked during the trial. You wanted to know why humans are so much more advanced in warfare." Kelvanis nodded slowly. "I have been reading your history. I am beginning to understand. Tell me what you have learned." Kelvanis looked out at the peaceful valley. "You spent 10,000 years fighting yourselves. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy was developed not against alien enemies but against other humans. You learned warfare from the inside, understanding both how to attack and how to defend because you were always fighting people just like yourselves." "That is part of it," Chen agreed. "What else?" "You almost destroyed yourselves multiple times. You created weapons that could end your entire species, and you came very close to using them. But you did not. You chose to step back from the brink, to create rules and laws that would prevent total annihilation. You learned restraint through near extinction." Chen smiled slightly. "You are learning. Is there more?" Kelvanis was quiet for a long time. "You never stopped innovating. Most species reach the stars and become comfortable. They stop pushing forward, stop taking risks. But you spent 400 years trapped in your solar system,